It's March 2020 and the world has come to a screeching halt. This is because of the COVID-19 pandemic caused by a coronavirus called SARS-CoV-2. Hundreds of thousands of people across more than 190 countries have reported positive for SARS-CoV-2 and many have died. Governments all over the world are enforcing a month-long shutdown, leaving people confused and waiting for medications to counter this virus. To understand the measures taken by the governments, let us go back and understand what are viruses, what happens when they infect us, and see if it sheds light on the current interventions. A virus is one of the simplest life forms. It contains a nucleic acid, which could be RNA or DNA, encapsulated in a protein coat and often an envelope. This makes an entire infectious viral particle. Now compare this to a human body which has nucleic acid, proteins, and many more macromolecules in each of the billion cells, which come together to form tissues, organs, organ systems, and finally the organism. A striking thing to note here is that unlike humans, viruses do not have multiple levels of organization. What does this imply for the viruses? In the biological world, this implies that if left to themselves, viruses cannot replicate, propagate, and evolve. It is known that the organisms which exist in at least one higher level of organization, that is the cells, are capable of self-replicating. This is the realm where all the bacteria lie, even the ones causing deadly diseases. But the fact remains that over thousands of years, viruses have propagated and evolved. How does that happen? Viruses are obligate intracellular parasites. They find their way into the host bodies, which allow them to replicate and evolve. There are viruses that infect bacteria, there are viruses that infect humans, and many other species in between. Such interaction of the virus with the host is the first step in a viral life cycle. So obviously, one of the ways to prevent viruses from propagating would be to cut off the host supply. This can be done by measures such as social distancing and quarantine. Another way is to prevent the virus from entering the human body. In case of common cold or coronavirus, this can be done by washing or sanitizing hands and by avoiding touching your face, at nose, mouth, and eyes. However, what does happen when the virus does gain entry into the host body? The first thing is that the virus finds a compatible site, tissue, or organ in the host body. This compatibility depends on the binding between the proteins present on the viral membrane or the viral envelope with the proteins present on the cell membranes in specific tissues. For example, the common cold virus prefers the tissues in the upper respiratory tract, for example, the nasal mucosa, the throat, etc., while the coronavirus prefers the lower respiratory tract, for example, the lungs. Hence, the symptoms from each viral infection vary. The common cold viruses cause runny nose, sneezing, phlegm production, etc., while the COVID-19 causes continuous dry cough, trouble breathing, and high fever. Once the virus lodges itself onto the cells and target tissues or organs, it gains entry into the cells and the viral RNA or DNA is released inside. The coronavirus RNA is released into the epithelial cells in the lungs. The proteins synthesized using the viral RNA take over the cellular machinery and divert its function towards replicating viral RNA and producing more viral particles. Eventually, the cell dies, viral particles are released and they infect other neighboring cells. While virus undergoes replication, the virus-infected cells can display patterns on their membranes that are distinct from their native patterns. Such patterns are then detected by certain immune cells resident in the lungs, which get activated. Upon activation, these cells produce high amounts of molecules called cytokines, which eventually signals a full-blown immune response. Such an immune response employs killer cells from both the wings of the human immune system, natural killer cells from the innate immunity and T cells from the adaptive immunity. These cells work by killing infected cells. The viral particles can be neutralized by antibodies secreted by another kind of cells called the B cells. In severe cases where the immune response is too intense, it may cause irreversible tissue or organ damage and could even lead to death. For example, in the case of COVID-19. In cases when the infection and immune response are less severe and the individual recovers, the immune system gains memory via the action of B and T cells. This is indeed also the principle on which vaccines work. Vaccines provide the body with attenuated or killed viruses and help us build immunity against the more potent viruses. If the vaccine programs are successful all over the world, then we can immunize all people. This would mean that nobody acts as a host in which the virus could propagate. Therefore, we can successfully cut off the host supply for the virus and can even eradicate it. Examples of this would be the smallpox virus and the polio virus. So if we look at the big picture without worrying about the details, we see that vaccines can have the same effect as social distancing. That is, they both cut off the host supply. Now let us put this in the current perspective with COVID-19. We currently do not have a vaccine for COVID-19. Therefore, social distancing is the only way to cut off the host supply. Antiviral drugs, on the other hand, have the same effect as good hygiene. They both get rid of the viral particles. Antiviral drugs can act by inhibiting steps of a viral life cycle, such as attachment of virus to the host cells, viral entry, viral translation, transcription, replication, viral assembly, or viral release. Understanding these biological processes and the processes required for drug development requires knowledge that has been accumulated by scientists over decades of fundamental research. Using this knowledge, scientists and clinicians are developing drugs and vaccines against SARS-CoV-2. In the meantime, let us fight COVID-19 using the tools we already have at our disposal. So stay safe and stay healthy. See you on the other side.